Usually when we talk about like national energy grids or massive macroeconomic strategies, we tend to picture these giant, tangible things.
Oh, for sure. Like sprawling solar farms baking in the desert.
Exactly. Or, towering offshore wind turbines, massive hydroelectric dams holding back millions of gallons of water. We expect the solution to global energy consumption to look like some colossal piece of heavy machinery.
Right, something highly industrial.
Yeah. But what if the next major energy breakthrough doesn't look like a power plant at all? What if your decision to work from your couch this Tuesday isn't just a matter of personal comfort, but is actually a vital cog in national energy conservation?
And that is the core premise we are unpacking today in this deep dive.
Yeah.
We're looking at an article detailing a proposal by Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi regarding the work-from-home model, or WFH.
Right.
The text basically positions something universally thought of as a corporate HR policy, a perk you negotiate during a job offer, as a sweeping macroeconomic and environmental strategy.
It's quite the pivot. But before we pull apart the mechanics of how a laptop on a kitchen table functions as an economic engine, we should probably do a quick neutrality check.
Good call, yeah.
Because we are diving into a proposal from a major political figure, it's really important to clarify that we are impartially reporting on the framework exactly as it's outlined in our source text. We aren't here to endorse or critique any administration's political viewpoints.
Exactly. We're purely exploring the logic, the math, and, the cause and effect chain presented in the material.
Right. And it is a fascinating chain to trace.
It really is. I mean, to understand how labor and location intersect with national strategy, the text starts at the very top, the macroeconomy, specifically focusing on the narrative around fuel.
Which is a huge factor.
Massive. The source immediately points to the immense scale of India's crude oil imports. Importing these massive quantities of crude oil from abroad is just a defining, unavoidable feature of their national budget.
So an analogy actually came to my mind while reading that section. Instead of looking at work from home as a workplace policy, we might need to look at it as an alternative energy source.
Oh, I like that. How do you mean?
Well, in physics, energy saved is functionally the exact same thing as energy generated. By simply not commuting, the petrol or diesel you didn't burn is fuel that the country now essentially has in its pocket.
That analogy maps perfectly onto the underlying logic in our source text, actually. Let's look at the mechanics of the daily commute. Every single day, millions of people get into private vehicles or board public transport to travel to a centralized office.
Right.
And that mass migration causes predictable, astronomical spikes in petrol and diesel consumption. It surges every morning, and it surges every evening.
The rush hour fuel burn.
Exactly.
But I have to ask about the real-world application of this. I mean, if millions of employees stay home a few days a week, does the national demand for fuel actually drop that significantly?
It does, yeah.
Or do people just end up driving their cars anyway to, I don't know, run local errands, go to the grocery store, grab a coffee? Are what just shifting the traffic from the highway to the neighborhood?
That's a fair question, and the source actually addresses that net demand issue. It looks at the scale of the commute versus the scale of incidental driving.
Okay.
A typical urban commute in a major city involves moving slowly through gridlock for miles, often keeping a combustion engine running for an hour or more each way.
Just idling.
Exactly, just idling. And the fuel burned idling in bumper-to-bumper traffic vastly outweighs the fuel used for a quick 2-mile trip to the local grocery store.
Right. That makes sense.
So by eliminating that prolonged, highly inefficient rush hour engine idling, the national demand for imported fuel drops dramatically.
Okay, so the sheer volume of the commute is the variable that moves the needle.
Yes.
So the demand drops. How does that translate into macroeconomic strength, though?
Well, because India imports the vast majority of its crude oil, reducing domestic demand directly reduces the country's reliance on foreign fuel imports. And that triggers a massive financial mechanism, which is saving foreign exchange reserves.
Right.
When a country buys oil on the global market, they typically have to pay for it using foreign currency reserves, often U.S. dollars.
Mm-hmm.
It is a massive outflow of national wealth.
I have actually always been a little confused by that mechanism, to be honest.
It can be tricky, yeah.
Like, if the Indian government wants to, say, build a new hospital in New Delhi, they pay for the construction, the materials, the doctors, all in rupees.
Mm.
Why does buying oil in U.S. dollars impact their ability to spend their own currency at home?
It really comes down to currency valuation and trade deficits.
Hmm.
If a country is constantly converting its own currency into dollars to buy foreign oil, it puts downward pressure on the value of its local currency.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, and a weaker local currency makes everything the country imports more expensive, which drives up inflation.
Right. Inflation.
Exactly. If inflation spikes, the government has less real purchasing power to fund domestic projects without destabilizing the economy. By dropping the demand for imported oil, you staunch that outflow of dollars. The currency stabilizes, and the wealth stays within the country.
Which frees up the ledger. And the text gets very specific about where that saved wealth should go. It introduces this concept of reinvestment.
Yes, exactly.
The foreign exchange reserves that weren't spent importing crude oil can be redirected into critical domestic sectors. The article explicitly highlights reinvestment into infrastructure, education, and health.
We're basically tracing a direct line from a decentralized workforce to national infrastructure. The macro-level logic suggests that minimizing the daily commute essentially funds the physical and social architecture of the country.
Which is wild to think about. But let's follow that physical architecture down from the national borders to the city limits, because the text explicitly focuses on the urban impact, naming specific tech and business hubs like Delhi, Mumbai, Bengaluru, Gurugram, and Hyderabad.
Right. Those are cities globally recognized for incredible economic output, but also for legendary, paralyzing traffic jams.
Yeah, and I want to push back on the scale of this problem a bit. Is the traffic in these specific cities, as frustrating as it might be for the locals, is it truly a national economic issue?
You mean as opposed to a local one?
Yeah, like a traffic jam in Bengaluru feels like a localized municipal failure, not something that warrants a nationwide policy shift from the prime minister.
It seems like that at first glance. But the text reframes that local traffic jam as a massive drain on national economic velocity. Think about the opportunity cost.
Okay.
You have thousands of combustion engines running, burning that imported fuel, but producing absolutely zero economic value.
Just sitting there.
Right. And simultaneously, you have hundreds of thousands of highly skilled workers sitting idle in those cars. Their time and energy are being consumed by the commute rather than being applied to productive labor, innovation, or even just personal rest.
Right.
It's a dual destruction of resources, wasting imported capital and paralyzing human capital.
Wow, okay. So a clogged artery in Mumbai slows down the entire national heartbeat.
That's a great way to put it. Furthermore, removing those vehicles from the road through work-from-home policies leads directly to lower carbon emissions.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The text is very clear on this causality. Fewer vehicles running means a quantifiable reduction in carbon being pumped into the atmosphere. This connects local traffic reduction to a much broader global framework.
Right. The text positions this not just as a matter of civic convenience, but as a crucial step toward achieving India's sustainable development goals.
Absolutely.
And if you consider the air quality index in some of these urban centers during peak seasons, environmental protection isn't an abstract, far-off goal. It's an immediate public health crisis.
Definitely. And air quality directly impacts public health, which loops back into the national budget we just discussed.
Oh, right. Because of healthcare costs.
Exactly. Poorer air quality means higher healthcare costs and lost labor hours due to illness. So, improving the urban environment through reduced traffic serves as a preventative healthcare measure on a massive scale.
That paints the modern city street as the literal front line of environmental conservation.
It really does.
But let's leave the street and look at the people inside the buildings. We've examined the national ledger and the urban ecosystem. How does this macro strategy actually play out in the microeconomy, like for the average person?
Well, the source breaks this down into a specific set of benefits for both the employee and the employer.
Okay, let's start with the employee. The most immediate, tangible benefit the text identifies is financial, right? Commuting is expensive.
Super expensive. Between the cost of fuel, the wear and tear on a private vehicle, or even just the cumulative cost of transit passes, the daily trek to an office consumes a significant percentage of a worker's income.
Yeah, for sure.
Eliminating that commute means that money stays in the employee's pocket, directly increasing their monthly savings.
But the text also highlights a non-financial asset that gets returned to the employee, which is reclaimed time.
Yes, time is a huge factor.
And this is where the strategy gets really interesting, because the text doesn't frame working from home as a chance to just sleep in or slack off. It specifically suggests how this reclaimed time should be spent. It points to family, health, and skill development.
Framing it around skill development completely changes the economic equation of remote work.
It really does.
Right.
I mean, think about your own schedule. Imagine taking the 2 hours you used to spend staring at someone's bumper in Gurugram and instead spending 1 hour working out and 1 hour taking an online course to upgrade your professional skills.
Right.
You are actively increasing your own human capital. You become a healthier, more capable individual, and you're doing it on your own time without the company having to pay for a formal training seminar.
Which naturally transitions into why this is an enormous win for the employer as well. The text outlines the corporate side of this ledger. Beyond gaining a workforce that is organically upskilling themselves, companies can drastically reduce their overhead costs.
We're talking about shrinking commercial real estate footprints, right?
Exactly that.
Yeah.
If you have a workforce operating remotely even part of the time, you simply do not need massive centralized office spaces.
Right.
And the savings cascade from there. Smaller offices mean you use less electricity, you require less enterprise-level internet bandwidth, maintenance costs plummet, and overall administrative and facilities expenses are slashed.
Yeah, you aren't paying a premium to air condition an empty conference room or keep the lights on in a half-empty cubicle farm.
Exactly.
And if a company shrinks its real estate footprint by, say, 30%, that is a massive chunk of capital that can be redirected into research and development or better Sangho tools for the employees.
For sure. And the text actually draws a direct correlation between this altered working state and actual output. It highlights that the increased satisfaction of the employees, who now have more savings, more time with family, and better physical health, leads to a verifiable, positive impact on overall productivity.
It sounds like a corporate cliche to say happy workers are better workers, but the source is positioning it as a hard economic mechanism.
It really is. The company spends less money on overhead, and in return, they receive a workforce that is less burned out, physically healthier, and producing higher quality work at a faster rate.
Wow.
This is the ultimate synthesis of the micro and the macro that the text is aiming for. The individual employee's skill development and productivity boost feedback into corporate success.
Right.
That corporate success drives economic growth while utilizing a smaller physical footprint, which feeds into the urban emission reduction, which ultimately feeds into the national strategy to lower imported energy reliance. The entire system is interlinked.
I totally see the interconnected logic. But I have to bring us back down to earth for a reality check here.
Okay, let's do it.
We've just outlined a vision that sounds almost utopian. If this model is so brilliant for the national economy, phenomenal for the environment, wonderful for the employer's bottom line, and amazing for the employee's mental health, why are we still building offices at all?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right, like why hasn't the entire global economy abandoned the physical workplace entirely?
Well, the text itself anticipates that exact pushback and provides a firm reality check. It acknowledges a fundamental limitation of this entire strategy. Work from home is physically impossible for massive, vital sectors of the economy.
Right, of course.
The source explicitly lists manufacturing, healthcare, and transport as areas where this model simply cannot be applied.
Yeah, I mean, you can't assemble an automobile engine over a video call.
Exactly.
You cannot perform emergency trauma surgery from your living room couch. And you certainly can't drive a public transit bus or deliver freight via a Wi-Fi connection. These jobs deal with physical atoms, not digital bits. They demand physical presence.
Yes. The physical world still requires physical labor. The text contrasts these necessary physical sectors with the ideal candidates for the remote model. WFH is highly effective and entirely sustainable in digital fields.
Like what, specifically?
The source names IT, finance, education, design, and other areas where the primary output is digital information, strategy, or virtual communication, rather than physical goods or immediate hands-on care.
But this creates a divided economy, doesn't it? We have half the workforce that absolutely must be on site to keep society functioning, and another half that could technically stay home forever. How does the text reconcile that split?
It leads to the compromise that experts in the text suggest, which is the hybrid model, a structured balance where employees spend a few days in the office and a few days working from home.
Okay, but I want to look at the mechanics of why the hybrid model is the recommended solution rather than just calling it a neat compromise. Because if you go 100% remote forever in those digital fields, you lock in all those massive economic and environmental savings we just discussed.
True.
Why give any of that up to drag people back into the office for 2 days a week?
Because a purely remote system risks degrading the very human capital it relies on. The text argues that the hybrid model is necessary to preserve collaboration and flexibility.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. While you can execute tasks remotely, spontaneous innovation, complex problem solving, and the transfer of nuanced corporate culture often require physical proximity.
A better metaphor for the hybrid model might be load balancing on a power grid. You don't need a city's infrastructure running at absolute maximum capacity every single day.
That is a highly accurate way to view it.
If everyone goes to the office Monday through Friday, you have to build 8-lane highways and massive transit systems just to handle the peak load of rush hour.
Right.
But if a massive portion of the digital workforce shifts to a hybrid schedule, you effectively shave 20 or 30% off that peak load on any given day. You don't need to build the next multi-billion-dollar highway expansion because the existing infrastructure is no longer buckling under maximum stress.
Exactly. The hybrid model acts as a pressure release valve for the entire urban ecosystem. You capture the fuel savings, the traffic reduction, and the lowered corporate overhead on the days the employees are home.
Yeah.
Simultaneously, you maintain team cohesion, facilitate high-level collaborative problem solving, and support the local businesses that rely on office foot traffic on the days they're in the building. It balances the macroeconomic savings with the human need for connection.
It's fascinating. Let's zoom out a bit and look at the overarching journey we've taken through this source text today. We started by examining what appears, on the surface, to be a simple HR policy about where you place your laptop.
Right, just a perk.
But PM Modi's suggestion is presented as a multi-layered strategic maneuver. It's framed as a tool for national energy conservation, a lever for environmental protection through emission reduction, and a mechanism for fortifying the national economy by keeping foreign exchange reserves inside the country rather than spending them on imported crude oil.
It really challenges us to see the hidden economic potential in our daily mundane routines. The simple act of not starting a car engine suddenly carries significant macroeconomic weight when multiplied by millions of workers.
Exactly. So think about your own daily routine, your own commute, and your specific industry. Could a hybrid load balancing model realistically work for the kind of output you generate?
That's the real question.
And if it did, could your industry's shift actually contribute to these macro-level savings? Or do you operate in one of those vital physical sectors where being on-site is the only way the job gets done?
As you consider where your own work fits into this larger economic puzzle, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. We spent time discussing how the massive savings from reduced oil imports and lowered corporate overhead could be redirected into building better infrastructure.
Yeah.
But consider the infrastructure of the cities themselves. If the hybrid model becomes a permanent structural standard rather than a temporary perk, how might the physical landscape of major urban centers fundamentally change?
That's a great point. If we no longer have to design our cities exclusively around the survival of the daily massive rush hour commute, what happens to that space?
Exactly.
If we don't need sprawling parking complexes and endless highway expansions leading directly into downtown commercial districts, what do we build in those spaces instead? It changes the entire blueprint of the future city. We started this deep dive looking for massive machinery, industrial power plants and colossal turbines. But it turns out one of the most powerful pieces of energy-saving equipment you interact with might just be the desk in your spare bedroom. You just have to understand the macroeconomics of how to use it.